The story of the Roman Empire is more than just history. It is the story of how much of the modern Western world came to be. For over 1,000 years, Rome grew from a small settlement on the banks of the river Tiber into a colossal power that dominated the Mediterranean and beyond. Its influence was so profound that we still feel its echoes today, in our laws, our languages, our buildings, and even in the way we think about government and citizenship. The Romans were not just conquerors, they were master builders, engineers, lawyers, and administrators. They created a complex society that was, in many ways, remarkably similar to our own, with bustling cities, diverse populations, and a constant struggle between the rich and the poor. Understanding the Roman Empire is a journey through time, a chance to explore a civilization that was both brilliant and brutal. At its peak, the empire stretched from the damp, misty shores of Britain in the northwest to the sun-scorched deserts of Mesopotamia in the east. It encompassed a staggering variety of peoples, cultures, and religions, all held together by the power of the Roman legions and the intricate web of Roman law and administration. The story of its rise and eventual fall is a dramatic tale of ambition, war, innovation, and decline, offering timeless lessons about power, society, and the very nature of civilization itself. It's a history that belongs to all of us. The sheer scale of their Roman achievement is difficult to comprehend. Imagine an empire that lasted for centuries, governed without the aid of modern technology like telephones or the internet. News and commands had to travel by foot, by horse, or by sea, yet somehow the emperors in Rome managed to control a territory that included parts of 3 continents. This vast state was not just held together by force, it was bound by shared ideas, a common language of administration, Latin, and the promise of Roman peace, the Pax Romana. This long period of relative stability allowed trade to flourish, cities to grow, and ideas to spread across thousands of miles, creating a connected world unlike anything that had come before it. This essay will take you on a journey through this incredible story. We will start at the very beginning, with the myths and legends surrounding the founding of Rome, and trace its evolution from a small city-state into a mighty republic. We will see how that republic collapsed under the weight of its own success, giving way to the rule of emperors, starting with the shrewd and powerful Augustus. We will explore the lives of ordinary Romans, examine the challenges that ultimately led to the empire's division and collapse, and finally reflect on the powerful legacy that Rome has left behind. A legacy that continues to shape our world in countless ways, often without us even realizing it. Every Roman story begins with a foundation myth, a tale that is part history and part legend, designed to give the city a grand and divine origin. The most famous of these is the story of Romulus and Remus, the twin brothers who were said to have been abandoned as infants, suckled by a she-wolf and later raised by a shepherd. As young men, they decided to found a city on the Palatine Hill, but a quarrel over who should rule led Romulus to kill his brother. He then founded the city in his own name, Rome, around the year 753 BC. This tale of brotherhood, violence, and destiny was central to the Roman identity, portraying them as a people favored by the gods but born from conflict. Following this mythical founding, Rome was said to have been ruled by a series of 7 kings. This early period, known as the Roman Kingdom, saw the city grow from a small collection of hilltop villages into a more significant settlement. The kings were not hereditary monarchs in the modern sense. They were chosen by the leading men of the city. They acted as chief priest, chief judge, and military commander. This era laid the groundwork for many of Rome's most important institutions, including the Senate, an advisory council of elders, which would go on to play a crucial role in Roman politics for centuries. The period ended dramatically, however, with the overthrow of the last king, a tyrant named Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud. The expulsion of the last king in 509 BC marked a pivotal moment in Roman history, the birth of the Roman Republic. The Romans were determined never again to be ruled by a single, all-powerful individual. They replaced the king with a new system of government designed to share power and prevent tyranny. The core principle of the Republic was that its officials, known as magistrates, were elected by the citizens for a limited term, usually 1 year. The most powerful of these were the 2 consuls, who held equal authority and could veto each other's decisions, a clever mechanism to prevent one from becoming too dominant. This new system was called res publica, meaning the public thing or the public affair. For nearly 500 years, the Roman Republic endured, a period of almost constant warfare and expansion. The early republic was dominated by a struggle between two social classes: the patricians, the wealthy aristocratic families, and the plebeians, the common citizens. Over time, the plebeians fought for and won greater political rights, making the republic more democratic. It was during this time that Rome conquered the Italian peninsula and began to look outwards, clashing with other great powers of the Mediterranean, most notably the city of Carthage in North Africa. These conflicts, known as the Punic Wars, transformed Rome from a regional power into a sprawling intercontinental one, setting the stage for its next great transformation. The success of the Roman Republic ultimately contained the seeds of its own destruction. As Rome's territories grew, vast fortunes were made by its generals and governors who commanded huge loyal armies. The old system, designed to run a small city-state, struggled to manage a vast and complex dominion. The 1st century BC was a time of immense turmoil, marked by bitter civil wars as powerful men like Marius, Sulla, Pompey, and Julius Caesar vied for ultimate control. These conflicts tore the fabric of the Republic apart, demonstrating that the old political structures were no longer fit for purpose. The ambition of these individuals proved stronger than their loyalty to the state. The most famous of these figures was Gaius Julius Caesar. A brilliant general and a canny politician, he conquered Gaul, what we now call France, and amassed enormous wealth and military power. His refusal to disband his army and his subsequent decision to cross the Rubicon River into Italy plunged the Republic into another devastating civil war. He emerged victorious and was made dictator for life, effectively ending the Republic in all but name. However, his ambition alarmed many senators who feared he would declare himself king. In 44 BC, on the Ides of March, a group of senators assassinated him in the theatre of Pompeii, hoping to restore the Republic. Their actions, however, only led to more chaos and another round of civil wars. Out of the chaos that followed Caesar's death, one man emerged supreme, his great-nephew and adopted son Octavian. He was only a teenager when Caesar was killed, but he proved to be a master strategist and a ruthless politician. In a series of complex alliances and brutal conflicts, he defeated all his rivals, including the famous lovers Mark Antony and Cleopatra of Egypt. By 27 BC, he stood as the undisputed master of the Roman world. Wary of Caesar's fate, however, he was careful not to appear as a dictator. He cleverly presented himself as the restorer of the Republic, a savior who had brought an end to a century of civil war. Octavian's genius was political. He accepted a new title from the Senate, Augustus, meaning the revered one. While he claimed to be merely the princeps, or first citizen, he held all the real power. He controlled the armies, the treasury, and the most important provinces. This was the beginning of the Roman Empire. Augustus ushered in an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, which would last for over 200 years. He reorganized the state, reformed the army, and initiated a massive building program that transformed the city of Rome, famously boasting that he found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble. The Republic was gone, and the age of the emperors had begun. The government of the Roman Empire was a complex blend of the old and the new, a system that maintained the illusion of the Republic while concentrating real authority in the hands of one man, the emperor. The emperor was the ultimate source of power. He was the commander-in-chief of the army, the supreme judge, and the final authority on all matters of state. His position was not officially hereditary, but in practice, emperors often chose their own successors, either by adopting a talented individual or by promoting a close family member. This system could be stable under a wise ruler, but it could also lead to chaos and civil war when a succession was disputed, a recurring problem throughout Roman history. Alongside the emperor, the Roman Senate continued to exist, a symbol of Rome's republican past. It was composed of several hundred of the wealthiest and most influential men from across the empire, typically former magistrates. In theory, the Senate was a powerful legislative and advisory body. It could pass laws, manage the state treasury, and act as a high court. However, its real power was greatly diminished compared to its role during the Republic. A wise emperor would treat the Senate with respect, seeking its advice and allowing it to manage certain provinces, thereby maintaining a cooperative relationship. A foolish or tyrannical emperor, however, might ignore or openly antagonize the senators, creating dangerous political tensions. Day-to-day administration of the vast empire was carried out by a sophisticated and growing bureaucracy. The provinces were divided into two types. Some, known as senatorial provinces, were peaceful and were officially governed by the Senate, which appointed governors for short terms. The more strategically important provinces, especially those on the frontiers with large military garrisons, were under the direct control of the emperor. He appointed his own legates or governors to manage them. These officials were responsible for collecting taxes, overseeing justice, and commanding the local legions. This system allowed the emperor to keep a firm grip on the army, the true foundation of his power. Over time, the imperial administration became more complex and professional. Emperors relied on a growing staff of secretaries, clerks, and advisors, many of whom were freedmen, former slaves, or equestrians, members of the business class just below the senators. This civil service managed the empire's finances, its food supply, particularly the vital grain shipments to Rome, its massive public works projects, and its extensive network of roads and communications. It was this remarkable administrative machinery working in tandem with the military that allowed the Roman Empire to function effectively for so many centuries, holding together a diverse collection of peoples under a single, centralized authority. The famous saying, "All roads lead to Rome," was more than just a proverb. It was a statement of fact about the empire's incredible infrastructure and its political geography. At its greatest extent under the Emperor Trajan in the early 2nd century AD, the Roman Empire was a colossal entity. It stretched over 2 million square miles, from the cold frontiers of Hadrian's Wall in northern Britain down to the hot sands of Egypt and North Africa. It ran from the Atlantic coast of Portugal and Spain in the west, across Gaul and Italy, all the way to the lands of Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq, in the east. This vast territory was home to an estimated 50 to 70 million people, perhaps a quarter of the world's population at the time. To control and connect this sprawling domain, the Romans became master engineers and builders. They constructed an astonishing network of over 50,000 miles of high-quality paved roads. These roads were built primarily for the military, allowing legions to be moved quickly to trouble spots on the frontiers. However, they also became vital arteries for trade, communication, and the spread of Roman culture. Along these roads, a state-run postal service, the Cursus Publicus, carried official messages and government officials across the empire. This infrastructure was the glue that held the empire together, making it possible to govern such a large and diverse area from a single capital. While Rome was the undisputed heart of the empire, it was just one of many great cities that flourished under Roman rule. Cities were the engines of Roman civilization, centers of administration, trade, culture, and social life. Across the empire, new cities were founded and existing ones were developed on the Roman model, often featuring a grid-like street plan, a central forum or marketplace, temples, bathhouses, theaters, and amphitheaters. These urban centers helped to spread a common Roman way of life. Major cities like Alexandria in Egypt, a great center of learning and trade, and Antioch in Syria, a key hub on the trade routes to the east, were magnificent metropolises with huge populations. Other important cities dotted the map, each playing a vital role in the life of its province. In North Africa, Carthage rose from its ashes to become a major agricultural and commercial center. In Gaul, Lugdunum, which is modern-day Lyon, served as the provincial capital and a major mint. In the east, cities like Ephesus and Corinth were bustling centers of commerce and culture, rich with history long before the Romans arrived. Even on the frontiers, cities like Londinium or London in Britain and Colonia Agrippinensis, which is Cologne, in Germany grew from military camps into important urban settlements. These cities were the nodes of the imperial network, projecting Roman power and culture into every corner of the realm. Roman society was deeply hierarchical and stratified, with a vast gulf between the immensely wealthy elite and the impoverished masses. At the very top was the senatorial class, the great landowners whose status was based on inherited wealth and political influence. Below them were the equestrians, or knights, a class of wealthy businessmen, bankers, and senior public officials. Together, these two groups formed the upper crust of society. The vast majority of the population, however, were the plebs, or common people. This group included everything from small-scale farmers and shopkeepers to artisans and laborers. At the very bottom of the social ladder were the slaves, who were considered property and had no rights at all. Despite these rigid divisions, there was some possibility of social mobility. A soldier could rise through the ranks and gain wealth and citizenship upon retirement. More commonly, a slave could be granted their freedom by their owner, becoming a freedman or freedwoman. These former slaves could become quite successful, especially in business, though they often faced social prejudice. Citizenship was another key distinction. Initially, it was limited to the men of Rome itself, but it was gradually extended to people in Italy and then to loyal communities in the provinces. Finally, in 212 AD, the Emperor Caracalla granted Roman citizenship to all freeborn men in the empire, a landmark decision that helped to create a more unified imperial identity. Roman culture was a rich tapestry woven from its own traditions and the influences of the many peoples it conquered, most notably the Greeks. The Romans admired Greek art, literature, philosophy, and architecture, and they adapted these forms to suit their own tastes and needs. In architecture and engineering, the Romans were true innovators, perfecting the use of the arch, the vault, and concrete to create massive and durable structures like the Colosseum, the Pantheon, and the vast network of aqueducts that supplied their cities with water. Latin, the language of the Romans, became the language of law, administration, and scholarship throughout the western half of the empire, forming the basis for modern Romance languages like Italian, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. Daily life for a Roman depended heavily on their social status. A wealthy Roman might spend his day attending to business in the forum, relaxing at the public baths, and hosting extravagant dinner parties in his luxurious villa. For the poor, life was a constant struggle. Most lived in cramped, poorly built apartment blocks called insulae, which were prone to fire and collapse. They worked long hours for low wages and relied on the state's distribution of free grain, the dole, to survive. Public entertainment, often violent and spectacular, was a major feature of urban life for all classes. The state provided bread and circuses, free food and grand spectacles like chariot races in the Circus Maximus and gladiatorial contests in the Colosseum to keep the populace content and distracted. In the early days of the Roman Empire, a new religious movement began in the province of Judea, a region with a long history of political and religious unrest. This movement was based on the life and teachings of a Jewish preacher named Jesus of Nazareth. His followers, known as Christians, believed that he was the Son of God, the Messiah, promised in Jewish scripture, and that he had been resurrected after his crucifixion. Initially, Christianity was just one of many small, obscure cults within the vast and religiously diverse empire. The Romans were generally tolerant of other religions, provided that their followers also showed respect for the traditional Roman gods and, crucially, for the cult of the emperor. Christianity, however, posed a unique challenge to the Roman authorities. It was an exclusive religion. Christians refused to worship the Roman gods or to participate in the imperial cult, which involved making sacrifices to the emperor's divine spirit. They believed there was only one true God, and that all other gods were false idols. This refusal was seen by the Romans not just as religious stubbornness, but as an act of treason and defiance against the state. As a result, Christians were often viewed with suspicion and hostility. They were accused of various strange practices and were sometimes used as scapegoats for public disasters, such as the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, for which the Emperor Nero blamed them. For the first few centuries of its existence, the Christian Church faced intermittent but sometimes severe persecution. Emperors like Decius and Diocletian launched empire-wide campaigns to force Christians to renounce their faith and sacrifice to the Roman gods. Those who refused faced imprisonment, confiscation of property, torture, or execution. These martyrs, as they became known, were revered by their fellow Christians, and their stories helped to strengthen the resolve of the growing church. Despite the persecutions, or perhaps because of them, Christianity continued to spread. Its message of salvation, its promise of an afterlife, and its strong sense of community and mutual support appealed to many people across the empire, especially the poor, slaves, and women. The turning point came in the early 4th century with the Emperor Constantine the Great. According to tradition, on the eve of a decisive battle in 312 AD, Constantine saw a vision of a Christian symbol in the sky and heard the words, "In this sign, conquer." He had his soldiers paint the symbol on their shields, won the battle, and attributed his victory to the Christian God. The following year, he issued the Edict of Milan, which granted religious toleration throughout the empire and ended the persecution of Christians. Constantine became a patron of the church, and by the end of the century, under the Emperor Theodosius I, Christianity had become the official state religion of the Roman Empire. The pagan temples were closed, and the empire that had once tried to destroy Christianity was now its greatest champion. By the 3rd century AD, the long peace of the Pax Romana was a distant memory. The empire entered a period of profound crisis, often called the Crisis of the 3rd Century. This was a 50-year period of near-constant civil war, foreign invasion, and economic collapse. Emperors were made and murdered with alarming frequency, often proclaimed by their own troops and lasting only a few months before being overthrown by a rival general. The political instability was crippling. At the same time, the empire's frontiers came under intense pressure from external threats. Germanic tribes like the Goths and Franks crossed the Rhine and Danube rivers to raid Roman territory, while in the east, the powerful Sasanian Empire of Persia posed a constant military threat. The economic problems were just as severe. To pay for the endless wars, emperors debased the currency, mixing less and less silver into their coins. This led to rampant inflation, making savings worthless and disrupting trade. The constant warfare destroyed farmland and made travel unsafe, further damaging the economy. The state raised taxes to crippling levels to pay for its massive army and bureaucracy, driving many small farmers out of business and into a state of semi-serfdom, tied to the great estates of the wealthy landowners. Plagues swept through the empire, reducing the population and creating a chronic shortage of manpower for both the farms and the army. In an attempt to manage these overwhelming problems, the Emperor Diocletian, who came to power in 284 AD, made a radical decision. He concluded that the empire had become too large and complex for one person to rule effectively. He therefore instituted the Tetrarchy, or rule of 4, dividing the empire into an eastern and a western half, each with a senior emperor called an Augustus and a junior emperor called a Caesar. This system was designed to provide better local defense and ensure a smooth succession. Although the Tetrarchy itself did not last, Diocletian's decision to split the empire's administration into eastern and western parts had long-lasting consequences. Constantine the Great later reunited the empire under his sole rule, but he made another fateful decision that reinforced the division. In 330 AD, he moved the capital of the empire from Rome to a new city he founded in the east, at the site of the ancient Greek city of Byzantium. He named it Constantinople, the city of Constantine, which is modern-day Istanbul. This new Rome was strategically located, easier to defend, and closer to the wealthy eastern provinces and the dangerous frontiers on the Danube and with Persia. While Rome remained the symbolic heart of the empire, political, military, and economic power increasingly shifted to the east, leaving the western half more vulnerable and isolated. The final collapse of Roman power in the west was not a single event, but a long and complex process that unfolded over the course of the 5th century. The Western Roman Empire, weakened by internal problems and starved of the resources of the richer East, struggled to defend its vast frontiers. Large groups of Germanic peoples, such as the Goths, Vandals, and Franks, crossed into the empire, sometimes as invaders, other times as allies or settlers. In 410 AD, the city of Rome itself was sacked by the Visigoths, an event that sent shockwaves across the Mediterranean world. The final blow came in 476 AD when the last Western Roman emperor, a young boy ironically named Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by the Germanic chieftain Odoacer. This date is traditionally used to mark the end of the Western Roman Empire. However, the story of Rome did not end in 476 AD. In the East, the empire not only survived but thrived. This Eastern Roman Empire, which we now call the Byzantine Empire, continued for another 1,000 years with its capital at Constantinople. It preserved Greek and Roman learning, codified Roman law in the great work of the Emperor Justinian, and acted as a Christian bulwark against invaders from the East. The Byzantine Empire saw itself not as a successor to Rome, but as the Roman Empire, plain and simple. It finally fell in 1453 when Constantinople was conquered by the Ottoman Turks, a moment that truly marked the end of the last living remnant of Roman power. The legacy of the Roman Empire is all around us, embedded so deeply in Western civilization that we often take it for granted. Perhaps its most significant contribution is in the field of law. Roman legal principles, such as the idea that a person is innocent until proven guilty, and the importance of evidence, form the bedrock of many modern legal systems across Europe and the Americas. The Latin language of Rome evolved into the Romance languages, Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian, and gave thousands of words to many others, including English. Our alphabet is the Roman alphabet. Our calendar, with its names for the months, is a direct inheritance from the Romans. In architecture, Roman innovations like concrete and the arch continue to influence how we build. In politics, concepts like the Republic, the Senate, and citizenship still shape our political discourse. The idea of a unified Europe, embodied in institutions like the European Union, owes a conceptual debt to the memory of the Pax Romana. And finally, Rome's adoption and spread of Christianity fundamentally shaped the religious and cultural landscape of Europe and the world. The Roman Catholic Church, with its administrative center still in Rome, its hierarchy and its use of Latin, is a direct institutional successor. In countless ways, the echoes of the Roman Empire continue to reverberate through our modern world, a testament to its immense and enduring power.